Hello, and welcome to this very special webinar about financial risk with me, Eleanor Mills. I'm the founder of Noon, and the incredible Danny Hewson, formerly of the BBC, now Queen of all financial insight at AJ Bell, and ready to answer your questions. He knows a hell of a lot more about all of this than I do, which of course is the point. Hang on, let me just let's just add and let in some more people. Admit all, that's what I'm trying to have a look at. So lovely to see so many of you. I'm also really delighted as a Queenager that you're all really interested in getting to grips with your finances, because what is really, really clear is that that is an absolutely crucial thing for all of us to do, because we'll talk about this, I'm sure, a lot more this evening, but basically it's going to be, we're all going to have a very long and impecunious old age if we don't really start getting to grips with our finances now. And I have to say, what really started motivating me about all of this was my discovery of the gender pensions gap. And we all know about the gender pay gap, but the gender pensions gap is really terrifying. Women are retiring with 35% less in their pension pots than men. And we've really got to do something about it, because we live longer. And we're going to have less money to do that on. So we all need to get extremely savvy about what to do with our hard-earned cash. And it's actually becoming such an issue that even the government are taking note. It's why they've been taking up quite a lot of stuff that we've been doing about Queenagers and keeping women in the workplace till they're 68, because it's all very well making us work till we're 68, but if no one will employ us because of gendered ageism, then that's not great, and that's really not good for our pensions. So that's kind of the Noon that's the Noon take on this. And in fact, we're going to be, I'm just waiting for everyone to come in because I can see there's more people joining. We're going to be at the Labour Party conference making exactly this point at a big Noon party and event that we're hosting with a whole load of the new lots of Queenagers in the new government. We're very happy about that. So Annalise Dodds and lots of them are going to be coming to our Noon party to spread this message about why we need to keep Queenagers in work. So it's a really important part of this whole piece about our finances. So I think that's enough waffle for me. That'll keep us going. Is that Jen? The thumbs up. Well done, darling. Oh, still someone in the waiting room. I'll admit them, Jen, if you do. So this is down below me, or I don't know how you can see it, but down below me on my screen is the lovely Jen in black and white. This is Jennifer Howes, who's our editorial director at Noon, an old colleague of mine from the Times. We ran the online bit together then a very, very, very long time ago. And Jen was my help me set up Noon in the first place, and runs everything on the website. And you may have noticed it's all getting a bit of a makeover. That's all down to her genius. So Jen also knows a lot more about finance than I do. So Jen, over to you, darling.
Yes. So hi, everyone. So glad y'all are here. This is a topic that's really close to our hearts at Noon, and mine personal heart. I'm going to disappear after a moment and leave the spotlight on these two, but just a couple notes. This is being recorded, so we will be sending around the video afterwards. So if you have to duck out, or for those who registered and couldn't make it, there will be a video, and you can also send it on to any of your friends who you think might benefit, because there's going to be lots of interesting information. Just a reminder, we love to see your shining faces, so if you fancy turning on your camera, please do. Please do keep yourself muted. It just helps for the sound quality. I'll be in the chat chatting along. If questions occur, go ahead and write them as the discussion unfolds. And these guys will either pick them up in the moment, or put a pin in them for later. But we want to know all your questions, and that's really what this session is all about. So without further ado, I'm going to disappear and hand over.
Oh, Jen, thanks so much, love. It's so nice to see lots of you turn on your cameras. Hello, lovely to see you all. Hello, Amy. I can only see the kind of first row of you all, but very lovely to see lots of familiar faces and new faces. So the absolute point of these sessions, for those of you who haven't come to one before, is no question is stupid. And I really say that with feeling, as somebody who is not an expert on any of this stuff and has often been made to feel extremely stupid when I've been in with financial advisors, although I don't usually think of myself as a stupid person. So really, really, this is an opportunity to ask anything you like. There is no such thing as a stupid question, because there are lots of these things which are kind of full of acronyms, or that we don't understand, or which have kind of been made falsely complicated. And what's brilliant about Danny is that she's very good at explaining it in kind of language of, which we understand, not in acronyms. So this is a really, really good opportunity to ask things that you've always slightly kind of wondered and didn't want to ask. So I really encourage you to do that. And the other things Danny said is that if she doesn't know the answer to your question, if you email her, or if you email us, and Jen is about to put a noon email in the chat, we will get back to you. And then the other thing to say to you is that this is really kindly brought to you with us by AJ Bell, and their Money Matters newsletter is excellent, and we'll also give you a link to that. So because I just think that this piece about financial education for queenagers is completely crucial. So Danny, take it away. Danny's also going to give us a kind of a little presentation just to kind of get us going, and then we're going to go into a big chat and answer all your questions. So
yeah, I'm
take it
delighted
away.
to be here. As Eleanor said, I worked at the BBC for 20 years, and I've only been in finance for the last 3 years. So that's why potentially some of the questions that you might ask, I might not know the answer to, but it does mean that I understand how to put things in a way that seems to make sense, to try and get rid of that jargon, which is just absolutely writ large all the way through financial services. So with that said, I'm going to attempt to share my screen. I've just managed to go completely wrong. It's always the way, isn't it, that you hit the wrong button when you're trying to share your screen.
I promise you,
And
it worked beautifully in our little kind of
it
test
did.
session
It
beforehand.
did work beautifully. Right. I hit share here. I hit that button there.
Yeah, we were both laughing about how before when we were journalists, we never had to make PowerPoints. This is a kind of new thing in all of our lives.
It absolutely is. So hopefully you can see that now.
Give it a
Eleanor, have you
second.
got that?
Not yet.
Not yet.
We've got Magic Jen in the background though, so hopefully
Magic
she can help.
Jen. Right.
No, I think go back to hit the green share button.
Oh
Share.
no, it's
There you
coming, it's
go.
coming, it's coming, it's coming.
There we go.
Aha! Hurrah, hurrah.
Ha! I've managed it. See,
And then
I
put it
know.
into
There we
presentation
go.
mode then.
Okay.
Oh, well
So
done. Now it even looks like a presentation. Go you. Queen
I
agent,
know. I
technological
feel
advice.
like, well, I have to say, first of all, that I am a queenager, and therefore tech sometimes does leave me behind.
Yes.
I can make a piece of television, but trying to make a PowerPoint is not something that I have ever been particularly brilliant at, although I've had to do it the last few years. However, I do know the stuff that is on the PowerPoint. So first of all, I just want to introduce you all to AJ Bell's Money Matters campaign. We launched it 3 years ago now, and we have podcasts and articles. And as Eleanor very kindly said, we also have a newsletter. We'd love to get you to subscribe. We like people to ask us questions and then provide content that you want. And the reason that we started the campaign was exactly that. So Eleanor was just talking about the gender pension gap. Well, it's massive. I mean, it is such a huge number. I didn't even want to think about putting the zeros up on the screen. And just to put it into some
1.65
kind,
trillion. Wow.
yes, to put it into context, Eleanor, have you got an idea of how old as a woman you would need to be to start saving into your pension to make sure that you've got the same level of pension when you retire at state pension age?
No, no idea.
3.
I'd have to
3
be
years
3.
old. You'd have to
My
start
God.
at 3, or you would have to keep working until you are 84. And I have to say that now I'm in my 50s, more and more I realize that I really don't fancy working when I hit 84.
No.
So we know the barriers to investing. I mean, lack of disposable income is always one that comes up time and again. And Eleanor, what you were talking about, women getting out of the workplace in their 50s and 60s, or I had a friend that tried to get back into the workplace recently in her 50s and really struggled, and
Yeah.
that means that you can't then add to that pot. But further down we get, I don't understand it, which you were just saying, Eleanor. And then I'm worried my investment will fall in value. And that was something that really caught my attention, that 48% of women wouldn't be comfortable with any investment loss. Now, let's be fair, nobody wants to lose money, but without risk, there can be no reward. We know that from life, don't we? We take risks every day. We cross the road and we take risks. We get behind the wheel of a car and we take a risk. But what we do is we put controls in place for that. So if you're crossing a road, you might use a zebra crossing. If you're driving a car, you take out insurance. You make sure that you've passed your driving test. My daughter has her driving theory test tomorrow, so we know all about hazards on the road at the moment. But when you're talking about investing, a lot of people immediately seize up. And I think language is a big thing, because investing is not something that we use in day to day, is it? Save. I'll save for a house. I'll save for my pension. I'm saving up to go on holiday. That seems quite common. It feels natural. It feels approachable. We understand it. But investing, we don't. And yet we are actually, all of us, most of us, investors. Most of us have got a workplace pension. We've invested when we've bought property. We've invested when we bought a car. And these are the controls that you could put in place if you are talking about investing. So, as I say, there are three key things here which helps you figure out your appetite for risk. The first thing is to figure out what you're saving for. So we're all queenagers. We're probably now thinking about having a nice life in retirement, and we're looking to see whether or not our pension pot is going to carry us through. So then we get on to time. How long have I got? Normally, if we're talking to multi-generational audiences, we'd be saying, well, if you're in your 20s, then that's going to be great, because you've got a really long time horizon in order to make sure that, if you get a wobble in the stock market, well, you've got 40 years for that to be corrected. If you're in your 50s, things get a little bit different. But, I'm 51, and I know that I'm probably still going to be working when I'm 65, 66, 67. Might only be working part-time, but I'm probably still going to be working. So that does still mean that I have a good chunk of time. And then this is really important. How much do I want at the end? Because if you want to have a decent standard of retirement, then you need actually quite a chunky pot. And one of my colleagues, Rachel Vay, did a noon webinar on pensions. So if you didn't get a chance to have a look at that, do go back, because she'll be able to sort of deal with that a lot better. But if you pull all of those things together, then you can get sort of an idea of what your appetite for risk is. Some people would say that, if they see any money at all disappear from their pot, then that is terrifying. They don't want that. They've got sleepless nights. Other people might say, well, maybe 5–10%, because over a period of time, you tend to see that markets balance out and that loss recovers. And I have to say, we get a lot of headlines about stock market crashes. A couple of weeks ago, if you looked at the financial papers, you'd have seen market meltdown. 41 billion wiped off the value of stocks on the FTSE 100. And that is our 100 biggest companies that are publicly listed that you can buy shares in. But I had actually just switched my pension. And I'd looked at my pension, which had been invested then, the pot, for a month. And I'd made quite a bit on it in a month, was quite surprised. And the day that that stock market crash happened, suddenly I'd lost a load. A week later, everything was not only back to where it was, but actually better. And I'd made even more than I had before that crash. So it's just to give you an indication that you shouldn't get scared over those sort of financial headlines and the volatility. Yes, there is risk. Yes, potentially you can lose money, but over time, and particularly with some of the mitigations that I'm about to talk about, that might make you feel a little bit better. And here's my ladder. So if you think about risk like a ladder, if you start at the bottom with cash, that's pretty safe. You know, unless you're putting your cash under your mattress and then the house burns to the ground, if you've got it in the bank, it's going to stay there for you. It is potentially going to add a little bit in terms of interest, but not a great deal. Then you've got the next level up with bonds. So if you've not heard of bonds, it's basically you're lending money to either a company or the government, and you're getting an IOU in return, and you'll get a guaranteed amount back at the end of the period of time that you've loaned the money out to, and you'll get sort of little interest payments along the way. Then further along, you've got shares. Shares are when you own little bits of a company like Marks and Spencer or BP or something like that. Now, I've put in funds in there as well, because funds are kind of like boxes of chocolates full of lots of lovely different things. You can get bond funds and you can get equity funds. And it just means that you've got more than one. You're pooling your money with people so that you've got more exposure to lots of different things. And when I explain a bit later on about diversification, that is what we are looking for. We're looking for lots of different things. You don't want all your eggs in one basket. You know, I'm sure you've heard that before, but also you can't bake a cake without breaking some eggs. Now, the last one is venture capital trusts. I'm guessing most of you, certainly it wouldn't appeal to me. You're talking about smaller companies. They're not publicly listed. They're private companies. They might grow like Billio. You might get a great return. I mean, if you just imagine if someone had come to you 20 years ago and said, do you fancy putting a fiver in a company called Apple? You might have said, well, I'm not sure about that. I've not heard of that one, but can you imagine what would have happened to that fiver now? So that's just an idea of the ladder of risk. In terms of things like property and gold, you'd probably put those in the middle there, right in the middle of that ladder between bonds and equity funds. Now, the reason that I wanted to talk to you about cash is that women, despite what we often say, women do have money. They are interested in investing. They are interested in making sure that they're not paying tax when they don't need to. So we have a lot of women who have cash ISAs. That's the sort of investment default of choice for women. They'd go for a cash ISA because they understand cash. They don't understand bonds. They don't understand equities or shares or stocks or whatever the heck you want to call them, but they understand cash. Except when you invest in cash, even though you are making money in terms of interest, and over the last couple of years with interest rates actually creeping up substantially, you've been talking, maybe you've got 6%, hurrah. Except then you have inflation, and inflation will nibble and nibble and nibble away at your investment. So what you'll have in your bank is actually worth less than it was when you put in. And that is quite an important issue that I think a lot of women just haven't really got to grips with. And if you look at the difference between a cash ISA, if you'd invested 10,000 at the beginning of 2014, it would have been worth £11,222 after 10 years. After inflation, you can see exactly what's happened to it. Whereas 10,000 invested in a global stock market tracker, that's a fund, an equities fund, that would have been worth £30,172. And that is, as you can see there, the Fidelity Index World that one of my colleagues crunched some numbers for me. That also has been nibbled away by inflation, but as you can see, not so much. So in a nutshell, it is about trying to demystify risk a little bit. I think it's about trying to get a little bit of knowledge. And that's why webinars like this and the articles that are on the Noon website, the articles that are on the AJ Bell Money website are really helpful. Diversification. This is where we're talking about those baskets or those boxes of chocolates. You know, if you only invest in one thing, if you only have cash, if you only have property, then potentially, definitely, you know, that is where you can really come a cropper. The idea is that when you invest, you put money into lots of different things. And then if one thing is going down, the other thing hopefully is going up. And over time, that then balances itself out. So that is known as diversification. And the other thing I think is that everyone has their own risk appetite. What might be right for Eleanor might be like, do you know what? I fancy investing in some cryptocurrency. That's great. It might lose 50% of my money one day, but it might make 100% back the next. I'm up for that. Would you be up for that, Eleanor?
No, I always thought crypto was a bit dubious, but I did put some money, and some of you will laugh about this if you've read my book, into some quite risky companies who are investing in kind of psilocybin and different kinds of mental health treatments and kind of, you know, chemical versions, which because of the science shows that actually they're much better at treating depression than classic SSRIs. So I have taken a bit of speculation, but if I do that, I tend to do it in something that I have a kind of personal hunch about. But I've never fallen for a crypto scam. But I thought your slide about what happens if you put it in cash compared to just putting it into the most basic tracker is quite terrifying. And I hope that, you know, lots of us come away from that thinking. I mean, it's weirdly, I wrote a column, I wrote a Queen Age newsletter last week, which was saying that actually in midlife, the biggest risk is not taking any risks at all. And as you were talking about that, I thought, wow, that's so on the money. You know, I was talking about it in a more kind of existential way, but actually I think it's really true about that as well, that no one wants to put their hard-earned cash in it and have it nibbled away by inflation. So it's actually worth less than when you put it in. That would definitely make me think it was better to put my money in stocks than straight in cash. But of course, what you're saying is that we need a bit. So you need a bit of cash so that if you have an emergency, you can get it quickly. And then maybe you put some into a kind of safe tracker, which will basically track the stock markets. And then I think I put 5,000 quid or something into these more kind of wacky kind of, you know, funds. But partly because my brother, who's obsessed by this kind of thing, said that there's a chance that they could really go up exponentially. So I think you wouldn't put your entire pension into crypto, but it's worth maybe having a bit of a punt on some of it, because, you know, that might go up 5 or 10 times, which would be worth a lot more than just putting it on a tracker. So that's the point about having things in different baskets, isn't it, as I understand it?
Absolutely. And also this thing about go your own way is that, you know, some people might want to invest in something that they strongly believe in that is experimental, and that's fine. But you should only then put your money into things like that you are prepared to lose. When you are talking about your emergency fund, that should be in cash. You need to be able to access that straight away. When you are talking about your pension, then if you look at where your pension is invested, if you've never got to grips with your finances before, you'll probably find that it is already invested in one of these funds. It might be a multi-asset fund. That's where you get your box of chocolates, which has got your nuts and your fruit and, you know, your milk and your white chocolate, the whole 9 yards. It's got a bit of everything. It's got a bit of cash, a bit of property, some stocks and shares. Maybe it's got a bit of gold in there. It is a multi-asset. And also, if you're thinking about the kind of funds that, if you want to play a bit safe, and a lot of people, particularly when you get towards later life, when you know that in 10, 15 years time, you're going to want to access that money, then you're not going to want to be putting it into really adventurous funds. You're going to be looking for those cautious funds. They're not going to give you as much return, but they're going to give you still a decent amount of return. And when we're talking adventurous, we're usually talking about smaller companies, we're usually talking about emerging markets. So maybe investing in the Vietnamese stock market, in companies there. Whereas if we're talking cautious, we're probably talking about investing in much larger companies. You'll have much more invested in things like bonds, which give you a guaranteed income rather than those riskier things. So I think it's really important not to sort of say all investing is really risky. There are very different levels of investing. And I think this slide really sums it up for me. And I love that cute kitty. He is so lovely. I think so many people think that investing is like that dinosaur, really terrifying. You know, it doesn't exist in my world. Yeah. Whereas actually, you know, it's something that we're all already doing. It is already a part of our lives. And that cat might have claws every now and again. And sure, sometimes when you look at your investment, you might see that it has gone down. But over time, you usually find with the stock market that it balances itself out. And the idea is that if you go for that box of chocolates with a whole load of things in there, that is how you mitigate risk. And with that, thank you very much. I'll get rid of the slides for you. They will obviously be available on the webinar if you want to take another look. We can obviously bring them back up if we need to. And it's really interesting because the FCA is hyper aware that some people see these risk warnings and immediately say, investing is not for me. And there's a lot of work going on at the moment to try and understand, because they're important. We have to give these warnings. You have to understand that there is no reward without risk. But you also should understand that you can take a little bit of risk if you have those controls in place. So I'm going to stop sharing at that point. And hopefully that's been interesting, helpful, but I'm sure there's plenty more that we can crack on with.
That we can. So does anyone do any of you out there have a question that you're particularly keen to ask as we kind of get going? Or
we have a couple in the Eleanor, we've got a couple in the chat which are really good and I think very to
okay, cool. Sorry.
So you can see them there.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so Divya says, what are some of the tax considerations when investing through a stocks and shares ISA? Are there gains on sale or withdrawing? Good question.
So if you've got your stocks and shares ISA, if you're using an ISA, it's a tax wrapper. So whatever you're then making on your investments, it is not subject to tax. And I think that's really important because the same thing is true of a cash ISA as well. And that is something which a lot of people have been caught out by now that we have had interest rates much higher, because you only have a small amount that you are allowed to make in interest income on your savings before you are taxed on that. It's a personal savings allowance. And
how much is that, Danny? I should probably know that, but I don't.
So if you're a basic rate taxpayer, you're talking about £1,000. If you are higher rate, then you're talking £500, and additional, it disappears completely.
Wow.
And
so that's the interest on your savings. So does that just count with a cash ISA, or is that also part of having a stocks and shares one?
No, with a cash ISA and with any ISA, the idea of an individual savings account is that they are a tax wrapper. Yeah. So you are allowed to put in up to £20,000 a year, and whatever income you earn on that, then that is protected. Now, in terms of tax,
so just to clarify, so under that thing where it went from being worth 10,000 to 30,000, would you get taxed on the increase in the pot because it was in the stocks and shares ISA?
No, you only get taxed. Same with your pension. With your pension, you can take 25% tax free. And then you only get taxed when you start taking that as an income. So the remaining 75%.
Okay.
So you do need to think about when you are taking that pot out and then coming to add it to your own income, it will be counted as part of your income. So if you're still earning, then obviously you need to file a tax return. There are tax implications for that. But if you are, retired and you've got that income allowance, then yeah, it just makes a lot of sense.
Oh, I see. So the tax system's trying to incentivize you to only take it out when you're when you stopped earning, as it were, so it becomes part of your income.
I believe so. That's not ISAs are not my thing 100%. But I'll definitely make sure that we get back to you on that. But yeah,
Right.
your interest is protected within that tax wrapper.
Okay, so Nancy, I'm liking Nancy's style here. She's not quite going for the crypto, but she's saying I have about 6 or 7 very small pension pots. They're not in high risk funds, but I'm really thinking they should be. Any advice? What should she be putting them into? I mean, I would say the first thing, just knowing from what we've written about at Noon, is have you put them all together into one pot? Is that a Danny? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, Rachel obviously gave a great webinar talking about this. And the idea with pensions is that if you've got lots of teeny tiny pots, you might be paying charges on those for the privilege of having those pots. Also, it's trying to keep track of where they all are. And also the miracle of compounding, of having a chunk of cash in one place, that is what you want. The more money that you have in your pot, the more income interest you get on that pot, the more gains you get on your investments. So clearly, if you've got it all together in one pot, then that can be a really useful thing to do. You can also keep track of it more easy. I mean, when you're trying to figure out how much you want in your pension at the end when you retire, then if you can't see because they're all over the place, how do you know? And I must admit now I'm quite I keep an eye on my pensions, and I have a look every couple of months just to see how they're performing and figure out where I am. And I've got 3, and the reason for that is 2 of them I shouldn't move.
Yeah, I've
And
got
there are
one.
certain kinds of pensions where the benefits of staying in there, even if it's only a tiny amount, outweigh the benefits of consolidating them. So if you go through pension consolidation, and there are lots of places, including AJ Bell, which will do it for you now. So you just say where you've worked and it will hunt them down for you and put them all together. If there are pensions like that, it will come back to you and say, you maybe want to take another look at this one. So yeah, I think if there are no red flags, then yeah, absolutely put all your pensions together in one pot. And it also then depends on your risk appetite as to what kind of investment you want to make. Like I say, those multi-assets, or if you look at funds now, a lot of them have labels on them. So you will find one that will say cautious. You'll find one that says balanced. You'll find one that says adventurous. And they do what they say on the tin.
Mm.
And you can look and you can see the rate of return for all of those different investments. So you know what you are then getting out of it potentially.
That's a really good question. So to go to your 6 or 7 small pods sounds like you need to have a look at them to see if some of them have got defined benefits attached to them, and then if they haven't, bung them all into one pot, and then maybe start kind of having a bit of a portfolio of what you're investing in. So there's somebody else here saying, so I've left a small inheritance sitting in a cash ISA for the last 8 years. And she goes, "Door. Where should I start? What should she be doing?"
Sorry, I was just double checking the ISA thing. So ISA withdrawals are tax free because usually you've already paid tax on the money. So yeah, it's well worth taking a look at that. Sorry, Ellen, do you want to repeat that one?
Yeah. So we've got somebody here on the chat. Sorry, the names just slightly disappeared for me. Okay, it says AB to everyone. So she says I've left a small inheritance sitting in a cash ISA for the last 8 years. Door. Where should I start? What should she do? What should she be doing? Because you've got one thing across very clearly to all of us, Danny, already, which is do not leave the money in the cash ISA. Get it out. We all saw that slide of it going down, so we know that's not a good idea. So where should she start?
She should start by thinking about that slide that I showed, which is all about your risk appetite. So what do you want the money for? How long are you going to leave it invested, and what do you want to get at the end of it? So if you are then thinking, right, I don't need it now, it's been sat there forever, I probably might want to use it in retirement, or I might want to use it, to buy a fancy car when I turn 65. If you know what you want to use it for, then you can figure out where to invest it. And then it's figuring out how long you're going to leave it in there and what then you want to do with it. So you could look at the different types of fund then that are available to you. Are you a cautious investor? Are you someone that's looking for growth? You're thinking, right, I'm going to leave this in for 20 years. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with an adventurous fund. So it is literally then moving it across to a different kind of ISA. Now, you have to open up a different ISA. You can't just say that cash ISA, I want to turn it into a stocks and shares. We are trying to get some kind of ISA simplification going at the moment, because I think for a lot of people, it's another hoop to jump through, isn't it? You've gone through the rigmarole of opening up a cash ISA. It's sat there. It's doing its stuff. It might be being eroded by inflation, but you know that little bit of income that you are making on it is, you're not being taxed on it, and it's there and you can pull it out when you need it. Fantastic. But if you then got to jump through another hoop to open a stocks and shares ISA and to move it over into the stocks and shares ISA, for a lot of people that can be off-putting.
Is it actually quite easy? What do you have to do?
It is easy. Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a phone call, or it's jumping onto the website and, moving things across. It is easy to do. We have a website called Doddle, which does exactly that. It makes things incredibly easy. And if you sort of find that you're overwhelmed by a huge number of options for you, then it pares it down to just a smaller number of options that you can then invest in. And I think for a lot of people, when they're starting out, that's what they want. They just want something that's really easy to use, really straightforward, and you're not bombarded by a huge number of opportunities. Because although we all like a box of chocolates with lots of options, sometimes you look at it and you go, and then you never take one.
So, thinking about your kind of your risk ladder. So if somebody thinks, okay, well, I've maybe got, I don't know, say you've got you've got 100,000. What proportion would you have in the kind of different levels of things which are risky? What kind of thing would you recommend?
So there's a really smart way that I've heard people talk about risk before, and this is when you're thinking about your age. So if you are 20 years old, then you should have just 20% in things like cash and bonds and that kind of thing. Whereas you should then have 80% in equity funds.
Because they're more likely to grow faster, so you're going to get a better return.
Absolutely. And then as you get older, when you get to 50, you should be talking about 50-50. And then as you get older, 60% should be in the more cautious income safe options like cash and bonds, and 40% then in equities. Now, like I say, everybody's risk appetite is different. Everybody's journey is different. People might be thinking that, I really enjoy my work. I'm probably going to be working until I'm 70, at least in some small capacity. So actually, I possibly have 20 years. So maybe I'm quite happy with, 60% in something like equities. Maybe I'm happy to go with something adventurous. But that's a good rule of thumb that a lot of financial advisors would use.
Okay, that's really helpful. So let's see what we got. Here we go. It's like going back into the lucky dip on the questions. Um, Yeah, good question. Can you comment on what's a reasonable or industry standard for fees on funds, ISAs, etc.? That's a really good question because often you look at it and it says, you know, this will be whatever it is, percentage management fee or fees, and you, if you've got absolutely no idea, you don't know if you're being ripped off or not. And I think that it showed in your slide that there's a big fear of kind of, you know, fraudsters or kind of being ripped off because one doesn't know. So I think having a kind of a ballpark figure for what a reasonable standard for fees or funds on things is would be really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, that's quite difficult because it depends what you want. So I could say to you, you know, you want to be paying the absolute least you possibly can. But if then the service that you're getting and the options that you are getting are not great, then, you know, you feel like you're actually being cheated. What you'll find is that when you are going to investment platforms, like there are so many out there, you will have the fees immediately posted so you can see exactly what you are paying, how much you are paying, when you are paying it. And there is now so much competition, particularly with investment platforms and that kind of thing, that you can compare them very easily. So I don't want to give a number just because there might be some people out there that have a pension or an ISA and they're really happy with the service that they're getting. And if they were to move it into somewhere where the fee was less, then they might not be as happy. So I think
But
it's
can you
a
give
sort
us a
of,
kind of a vague percentage, so somewhat a range kind of between, so what would be the absolute cheapest cheapest kind of fee you get?
let's have a look at Doddle, which is our sort of low cost investing. Um, come on, wake up.
Mhm.
No, I can't. You know when it says accept all cookies, and you're like, yes, please, I would like to accept all cookies, and then it won't let you do it. So let's go to a stocks and shares ISA. And you view ISA charges, and here you go. So with Doddle Stocks and Shares ISA, it's 0.25% on the first £250,000 of funds,
Right.
0.10% for funds between £250 and £500,000, and no charge on funds over £500,000. So that is you've got
That's
to,
so that's kind of
yeah.
that's the kind of but the bottom. And what would funds that were charging you more, what would you expect them to be doing for that for their extra money? How do you work out if it's worth it or not?
It's less about the, so there are some investments where people are working very hard for you, and there are
Yeah,
some investments which are just trackers, and
yeah,
obviously you get different charges with different funds and different charges for different, you know, having a stocks and shares ISA. So it's just keeping an eye on those things.
okay.
And everybody's everyone will be different about what they want. That's why so many people pay for a financial advisor, because what you are getting is bespoke advice which is tailored to you. It does feel a lot more scary when you're doing it yourself, and there's a big push at the moment to get to deal with this sort of guidance advice boundary, to try and help people have more education to know what they're doing, but without sort of veering into the guidance thing where, you know, you are expecting someone to say that this is exactly right for you.
Yeah. So it's, yeah, I think that's really important, that it's important to go in to see a financial advisor kind of knowing something, because otherwise I mean, I know I've done that and just felt like a kind of sitting duck because you just don't know whether you're being given good advice or not. But
Do you know,
is there a,
financial advisors more and more are understanding that a lot of people are going in and they don't understand. And a lot of women come to us for the first time because they've inherited, you know, some investments, or they've got divorced, or their spouse has died and they've never dealt with a financial advisor before, and suddenly they're having to deal with all of that. And I think financial advisors now are becoming much better at talking to people in a way that doesn't feel like you're being belittled, that does feel like you are being taken on a journey. And there are some brilliant financial advisors out there, and they are absolutely worth their weight in gold.
And on that, I think it's also worth saying that if you pay for, I think it's quite important when you take financial advice. Sometimes you think, well, why am I paying this person, you know, a few £100 to go and talk to them? But in a way, if you do that, you're protecting yourself, because if you go and speak to somebody who doesn't seem to be being where you don't need to pay them, they're probably taking a cut or a commission off the things that they're selling you, right?
Sorry, my dog has just this is what working from home does to you. My dog has just pushed open the door and wandered through. Yeah, I mean, when you are talking to a financial advisor, you know, yes, you are paying for that advice and privilege, but what they can do and what they can give you is peace of mind. What they're looking at is your holistic financial life. Now, a lot of people don't need that because they're not dealing with multi-million pound investments. And actually, if you're talking about, you know, an ISA, if you're talking about £20,000 a year, if you're talking about a pension where you're putting in, you know, £6,000 a year, £10,000 a year, then you can do that yourself because you are seeing the rate of return. It does depend on your individual circumstance.
Yeah. Okay, good. Someone says, I hear I used a financial advisor. They actually took me through a survey to go through my appetite for risk, and I based my investing on some of that. Yeah, that's right, Pammy. That's why we're doing this session, because that's the first thing that a financial advisor will kind of will do, kind of, you know, with you or for that or for you. Right, Julie says, for anyone in the UK with a few years in their pot, you have until April 2025 to buy back some years. I'm going back through that process at the moment, trying to get into the second class, i.e. £180 added. Sorry, I don't understand what this is about at all. Is this about pensions?
That's yeah. It's about pensions. If you want to buy some years back, you can add years if you don't have enough.
Oh, okay, right. Wow.
Okay, because
That's a state pension.
yeah.
This is for your national insurance contributions,
Yes,
right?
but
For
I
your
only
state pension.
I only have 10 years in the UK, but
Yeah.
I've been informed that I can buy up to 16 years, which will give me a third of a pension.
Wow.
Yeah.
How do you do that, Danny?
You go through the gateway to find out what your history is. Very important. I would advise anybody to do that as soon as possible to see what years they're missing.
Okay.
And then contact the pension people. And I was informed that I could buy up to 16 years. So I've already got 10, and I can buy 6 more.
And what does that then mean that you'll be?
Well, it means, but no, because I live in
calculating?
France. I don't live in
Oh.
England anymore. So my pension in France is going to be quite small. So I'm thinking, oh, I've got that. I worked for 10 years in the UK. Surely there's something. And I've been told, yes, I've actually got 7 years. And I've been told I can bring it up to 10 because 10 is the minimum. But I also was told that you can actually go up to 16, and you've got until there's a cutoff date, April 2025.
Yeah,
Okay.
April 5th,
And if you get
2025, yeah.
into the second level, it's 180, approximately £180 an extra year, whereas in the other level it's £800 an extra year. So I'm trying to prove to them that I'm having a little pension here. So can I please buy 6 years at £180?
And so it is, you go on the HMRC website,
Yeah,
and it's
you've
absolutely, it's down to national insurance contributions.
Absolutely.
And if you've got gaps, then yes,
Exactly.
you can fill them in. But after April 5th, 2025, you can only pay for the past 6 years, and that might not be enough to
Exactly.
qualify for the new state pension, because if you've got
Exactly.
you need at least 10 years normally in order to
That's
do
right. Yeah,
that.
Well,
exactly.
that's really crucially important for a lot of queenagers, because many
Absolutely.
of us have
Absolutely.
taken huge amounts of, of chunks of time out of the workplace to
Exactly.
caring or looking after kids. So thanks very much for bringing that up, Julie. That's something
Pleasure.
we
Pleasure.
will, Jen,
Bear it in mind.
we should do a big piece about that and say to people, particularly the
I
dead.
was just writing. Yeah, I was just writing that down.
Yeah, very good. We're on that. We'll come back to you for a bit on that. Now, I really like
Yeah.
this question too. How do you pick from the available funds to invest a pension? There are hundreds of options shown by my provider, Legal and General, and I don't know where to begin research as a beginner investor. I totally can relate to that. I've had exactly the same thing. You look at it and I have absolutely no idea. So give us some basics, Danny.
It is that minefield, isn't it? I mean, it is that box of chocolates when you go, wow, which one am I going to pick? But a lot of them do have sort of on the tin what they are. So if you are interested in responsible investing, if you want to not invest in companies which, oil companies, I know a lot of people are concerned about investing in oil companies because they really think that climate change is the key thing for them to become involved with. So they want to invest responsibly, because when they're saving for their future, they also want to think about, the future of their children, their grandchildren, or the planet. And that is one thing that you can take a look at. I think that's one of the reasons, as I say, that we did dawdle, because we are hyper aware that when you get that myriad of options, it is incredibly complicated and it can be incredibly overwhelming. I think if you start with that risk appetite, those three questions that led to your risk appetite, I think that's a really good way of starting. So, do you want to be cautious? Are you looking for income? Again, if you're looking towards when you get a bit older and you're thinking about your pension and you want to take some money out of your pension, instead of buying an annuity now, which is where you get a guaranteed income, so you effectively take out, it's like an insurance, you hand over your pot and you get a guaranteed income until you die. You can, there are certain ones which means that you can actually give it to your kids or your spouse as well. It's not just a matter of completely gone, but obviously it depends on the annuity that you get. They've fallen out of favor a little bit recently. So you also now get something called drawdown, where you leave your money invested and you just take out the bits that you need when you need it. And I think particularly because, for a lot of people now, when you're thinking about your retirement, you maybe want a little bit more when you are 72, 73, because you want to go and take that world cruise. Whereas when you hit 85, you might just be quite happy with a trip down the local M&S and a nice, meal deal. So
I'm
that's
going to be
why a
going
lot
to
of
the Arctic when I'm 85, Danny.
I
My
don't
mum is.
doubt you.
My mum's 82. She's still going skiing. So let's not fall into any kind of stereotypes here.
Well, so with those, you can go with income. So there are
Yeah.
certain types of funds where you get dividend payments, and then you're not eating into the capital. You're just taking out those dividend payments, and that's something for people to consider when they're wanting to take some of their cash. I mean, there are so many. So do you want cautious? Do you want growth? Do you want adventurous? Do you want balanced? And if you sort of think about that age thing, you will always see when you go into them the percentage of equities versus other things. So, for example, if you're going with an adventurous fund, you're probably going to find that it's 80, 90% equities, stocks and shares. or funds, stocks and shares funds, and it's maybe 10% sort of bonds and cash. Whereas if you are looking at cautious, you're going to probably look at 40%, 40-50% stocks and shares, and then, you know, things like bonds and bond funds and cash is going to make up 50-60% of it. So that's a really good way of starting to make that decision, because automatically you're going, right, I'm only looking at this section. I'm only looking at cautious funds, or I'm only looking at growth funds, or I'm looking for responsible funds. That will help. And
Okay,
then
so that knocks out some, and then you kind of keep
yeah,
like looking out what you don't want or what you think you do like.
yeah, absolutely. And you can see past performance. I mean, you know, we're all in this because we want our retirements to be able to go on those Arctic cruises when we hit our 80s. So we want to see our pot grow. So it is then looking at past performance, how have they performed? And you can, when you look into these, see what they're invested in. So there may be a lot of companies in there that you recognize and you think, actually, do you know what? Yeah, I like NVIDIA. I like the idea of being part of this technical revolution. Or you might think, yeah, I really like the idea of investing in Vietnam or India. But it's
Yeah.
then sort of, it's that balanced approach. There will be some that will think, actually, do you know what? I want a multi-asset. I want to have all of those bits and pieces in my fund. I want the whole box of chocolates in one place. So that is another way to sort of think about it. And for me, a really good place where I started, because as I say, I've only been in finance for a few years. I looked at my pension, which was just a workplace pension, and I looked at where that was invested. And then I started to dig into what that was invested in. And then I started, there are always compare functions as well, you'll find on your investment site. So you'll be able to bring in a few and see what they look like, and ooh, what's that done compared with what's mine's done. And I think that's a really useful way of doing it. But there are literally hundreds out there.
Yeah. No, I think
And
that that's a really good kind of way of thinking about what one might want to do. And somebody on here was saying that they use AJ Bell, and that they say that when you first start investing with them, they give you that they ask your appetite for risk, and then they give you like a whole kind of selection of you know, things that you might want to be part of. And I have to say I've done this relatively recently with my own pension. And what I did is I said I didn't want to be in any oil companies. I wanted to invest in, you won't be surprised, like there's lots of female founded businesses, and so I went for lots of kind of gender funds and clean energy funds, and you know, that kind of thing. So it actually feels quite empowering, because you suddenly go, I can actually use the money that I've earned to have an effect in the world, which is one that I want, you know, that which isn't just being managed by your kind of old company in their pension pot. When you take it out and you start having a SIP, which is a self-invested pension pot, which is kind of what we've been talking about, which have all these bits in it, then you suddenly have a lot more control, and you see the power that your own money has to make a difference for, you know, good or bad or whatever it is that you're interested in the world. And I think actually once one starts thinking about it kind of in that way, that by doing this we're kind of exerting power, we're kind of exerting some kind of potential through investing our money in that, we'll get a return in the end, hopefully, but we're also putting things into what we want rather than what we don't want, then it becomes, I think it becomes quite a lot more interesting. And also it kind of feels a bit more purposeful, or a bit more kind of like you're actually having an effect on it. And I think that then it goes from being something which is a bit scary and a bit kind of over there, and something that's a bit difficult, you don't really get, to something that can actually feel quite personally empowering. A friend
I
of mine who
think
works for, well, friend of mine who does a lot of campaigning with XR said to me that actually the biggest thing you can do in terms of climate change and that kind of thing also is redirect where you're putting your money. So we all have that possibility, which is why I'm so passionate about women kind of getting to grips with their money, because I think it's about us also raising our voices in the world in a different kind of a way.
and we shouldn't be scared by it.
Mm.
And I think it's okay to be scared, because when you think about it, I was having a look And, you know, it's only been since, was it the 1960s when women had bank accounts? It's only in
Yeah.
my lifetime that women have been able to apply for their own mortgage.
Yeah. Without a
So,
man. And my dad,
yes,
when my parents divorced, when I was in when I was 5, my mum couldn't have a mortgage in her own name. She had to have it approved by her father. And I think my dad also had to kind of agree, a bit like we were in Saudi Arabia or something. So I write about in my book about how we're the first generation who've really had to take control of our money, who, you know, for whom a man is not a financial plan, where we are going to have to do this for ourselves. So it's not surprising that there's some kind of, you know, reluctance about it, or kind of difficulties. But I think it's one of those things that once you begin to have some agency on it and to kind of get a grip, and I think that's why we're doing lots of these kind of seminars, it actually becomes something that's kind of quite interesting and empowering. I'm going to bring Jen in here because Jen's actually run a podcast about women investing before and been through her own like financial turbulence, so she's actually much better on this subject than I am.
No, I think I just wanted to pop in and say both what you were saying and what Danny was saying is I love all these questions. You know, I'm afraid, you know, we're about out of time, so we're not going to get to more. But yeah, so I did a podcast. It was called Women Take Stock, and it was for four friends, you know, each at a different journey, trying to get their trying to learn to invest. And I think even listening to this, often I can start to feel excited, but I feel my anxiety level rising. Like, I need to go do this and this and this and this. And really, we heard a lot about that from women who listen to podcasts. We hear about that from women who come to Noon and to these webinars. But, you know, we're doing it here, like coming little and often, you know, coming back to it over and over. That's the important thing. So it's not that everybody has to go away from this and sort their pensions. It's
Yeah.
like, you know, coming here and learning some of this and then going and listening to the other webinar that we did with AJ Bell and, you know, reading some of the materials, signing up for your newsletter, listening to podcasts. There are lots of good pieces of information. But I always just try and remember it's like it's little steps. And sometimes that little step is just going in and like, okay, finding where all your pensions are and making a document that lists where all your pensions are. And then you can read our story about how to consolidate those if you want to do that. But but yeah, I think even though I've, you know, spent a lot of time thinking about pensions and thinking about investing in money and whatnot, like during this, I'm like, how haven't I done that yet? And we have to kind of give ourselves a break at the same time and use an opportunity like this to feel empowered and realize we're actually building up our knowledge.
Yeah, and
yeah.
I must say I've learned so much by talking to Danny, and by having a read of the AJ Bell Money Matters pension. And Jen's completely right. Helena Morrissey, who's actually who's head of your AJ Bell Money Matters, Baroness Helena, who's a big, you know, former fund manager. She said to me this thing about you should think about your financial health like your physical health, that you kind of, you know, do a bit of it all the time, that it's not a kind of enormous mountain that you climb kind of once a year when you have to do your tax return. Sorry, guilty. But actually it's something that you do, that if you kind of check into it more often and you have it more under control, I do think that there's a great sense of that kind of financial control. But we did a thing, the first campaign we did with you was about financial spanks, which I kind of invented as a bit of a joke, because I kind of, you know, it's like, is everything being held in place kind of underneath one's frock? Always a bit of a thing for me. And so there was that sense of, you can't have you know, if you were trying to build all these other things that we're going to move into in our kind of queenager kind of golden years, all of that needs to be supported by some proper financial kind of underpinnings. That's what I was thinking about with the financial spanks for queenagers, because actually if we get that right, if you get the basics right, you know, just learning today that actually that putting your stuff in a cash ISA is actually more risky. You're like definitely going to lose some money doing that, in a way that, you know, you might well make quite a lot if you put it into some stocks and shares. You know, if you just kind of come away from this with that and shift some of your stuff into a tracker, you know, your future self's going to thank you for that. You're probably going to be like 10-20 grand richer, even if it's just on a small amount of money. So I think just it's kind of small steps, and then you do something that works, and then you're like, oh well, you know, maybe I can do a bit more of this, because it's actually not rocket science. We're just kind of the way it's often explained makes it feel much more tricky than it is. Good. Jen's put the
And
link to
back.
her podcast in the thing, and we're actually going to do more about this kind of thing within Noon. So kind of, stick with us.
Yeah.
And there are now already some quite good resources on the site and on our Noon YouTube channel, where this one will go to.
And you've got Helena coming on to do a webinar next month.
We have about investing. So we're going to learn from the maestro. So do some research in the meantime. Get some, because it's really amazing to get like an hour of Helena's time to kind of ask us some questions. So come really equipped with what you want to know, and we'll really kind of hold her to it and get her to answer all your questions in that session. And thank you so much, Danny, for joining us, and Jen, and all of you kind of at home. It's really fantastic to see you all, and do come back and we'll do some more. We'll do some more of this, because I think it's a journey that we're really on together. Oh, good. It was so nice to see lots of your comments. Because it's really good for Danny if we can also go back saying people were really engaged and interested in what we were doing. I mean, it's good for all of us.
And if you've got any
really
questions that I couldn't answer, then do send them, and yeah, we'll make sure, because like I say, I'm sort of on the same journey with you all, but I've been sort of keeping my eye in and really getting into the nitty-gritty for the last 3 years, which means I now understand it to this level, whereas I was, really struggling before. But yeah, if you've got any questions, we'll make sure that they get back to you.
Yeah, brilliant. And I know that some of you had some really good questions that you asked Rachel before, and that she kind of came back and gave everyone some kind of individual advice. So if there's something that you're really struggling with, we can we'll definitely try and help, and we'll pass those questions on to Danny. So with that, I'm going to let you all go off and enjoy your evening. It's quite sunny here. Enjoy the I don't know if any of you saw the super moon last night. It was the blue super moon, but we couldn't see it in London. It was too cloudy. So have a look out for the moon. It's the closest it gets to Earth and the biggest, and there's all sorts of seismic things going on, which are probably very good for your money, but it's meant to be orange and rather beautiful tonight. So that's my parting injunction. See, there aren't any other financial webinars where people tell you to go and look at the super moon. We try and do things a bit differently here.
Yeah, everybody look out for the video on email. So we'll be sending that around.
Yeah. And yeah, and we're looking forward to seeing lots of you soon. Now, we've got lots of there are Noon circles at the beginning of September. We've been sorting those out, lots of them all over the place, and we're running a 1-day retreat at Wasing. There's still a few slots on that in October. And we are doing a first retreat in Wales, really beautiful place near Abergavenny, only about an hour and 40 minutes outside London, at Laura Tennyson's place, the founder of Jojo Maman Bebe that I was writing about. She's on our podcast. So we're going to do an amazing retreat there at the end of October, which I'm really looking forward to. So there's lots of things to get involved in, and we're also going to be doing some more kind of walks and a big AJ Bell event. We're doing kind of Noon, a kind of big party, a pub quiz, and lots of fun at the beginning of October. I think it's October the 8th. I put it in one of my newsletters, but we'll come back to you more about that. And then we've got Helena, amazing Helena Morrissey, who has been such a huge supporter of Noon, actually, right from the very beginning. She's been on our advisory board. She's a really old kind of fellow traveller of mine. I was involved when she set up the 30% Club a long time ago, and she's a great pioneer in terms of women and money and all sorts of things. So it's great to have her next month. So do come and join us for that, and enjoy the rest of your August. I'm off on holiday on Thursday. I'm having a break after all the excitement of my book. So oh good, someone's into the super moon, hooray. And talk to you all soon. Thanks very much for coming. Lovely to see so many friendly faces.